Okay, I'm going to start this talk. First of all, I loved the fact that we're in a room full of people coming from diverse backgrounds, diverse interests, diverse concerns, and seeing this message of bringing it all together. Because I was around DevOps when the term was being coined. I can remember the conferences where there was a few people going, shouldn't we go for a coffee with the ops people? Shouldn't we talk to them? And I can remember those moments of going, isn't it insane that we don't? But as developers, I was a developer at the time, just a pure developer working in Java. I was very comfortable with this idea, this habitual acceptance, that what I was going to do was going to be thrown over a wall at some point. And then it was no longer going to be my problem. And that's very attractive. And then there were people telling me that wasn't okay anymore. So in fact, what happened is my habits had to change. And one of the things I've realized, one of the things I'm going to confess with you today, is I don't think we do most of the things we say we do. We talk a lot about domain-driven design. We talk about test-driven development. In fact, it's a bit like DevOps and DevSecOps and DevSec blah, blah, blah ops and everything else that goes into it. We're brilliant at inventing new phrases, and there's sort of these couple of different categories. One of them is all about how we're driving something. So I'm waiting for platform-driven development, the insanity of yet another phrase that means nothing. My point here is I think we have these phrases, but they don't really reflect what we do. There's something else, and I'm confessing here what I do, and it's how I've got so much wrong. And that's because I practice the great, very infrequently mentioned, habit-driven development. What I build is what I've seen before. What I build is whatever I'm comfortable with. What I do is whatever I've been vaguely successful or even not successful with before. Has anyone been on those projects back in the day where you spend 3 years building something, everything goes to hell in a handbasket, and then all of a sudden someone says, we're going to do it again, we've got a new thing to build, and what do you change? Nothing. Because what you think is that there must be something else that just went wrong, especially last time. So this time, we're always optimists. This time we'll be okay. Habit-driven development, I think, is honestly how we all behave. And having been a platform engineer for 30-odd years in this industry, yes, my hairline is for real. 30 years of building, one way or another, developer tooling, platforms, things that try to help developers have better lives. 30 years of doing that, I can hold my hand up and say, I've got it wrong a lot. And so some of the things I'm now going to share are those habits that I get wrong. Before I get there, though, I hope everyone understands the nuanced difference between habit and routine. Because we sometimes call things habits when they're not. A good example is my attendance at the gym. That is not a habit for me. It is a routine at best. I go to the gym because I have to. I have to go to the gym because guess what? I lost a lot of weight a few years ago. I got very ill. And then as I got better, the weight came back. It just does. And I realized I needed to go to the gym. But no matter how much I try and convince myself of the value of going to the gym, I hate going. I hate every second when I'm there. And I even hate the trip back because it hurts. And so for me, it's never going to be an easy habit. It's always going to take discipline and intention. It's always going to be a routine. Habits are different. Habits are when we do things, importantly, without thinking. And I think there's a disastrous amount of things we do in software development that we do habitually without thinking. So I'm going to try to help you today to see my bad habits, the things I do without thinking, and to talk about some of the effects of those things. And then I'm going to try and give you some good habits, particularly as we are in the middle of yet another big movement in our world. We had a cultural movement at the beginning of DevOps. We have a cultural movement now. It's very exciting. The signals are the same. The skepticism's the same. The over-promising is the same. But the habits can help us. Being aware of our habits and getting new ones can help us enormously. Okay, so let's talk about the habits. And I put these up not as things to aspire to. These are the failure habits. Number 1, not focusing on cognitive load. When I was brought into my latest gig, working on a platform at a regulated bank, everyone was doing what everyone does when they're first getting into platform engineering. Does anyone want to suggest what the very first thing you always build when you're doing platform engineering? What is it? If you were saying automating infrastructure, you're right. The answer must be in better infrastructure. It must be. It must be in better automation, better abstractions in infrastructure. Making infrastructure self-service must be what our engineers are crying out for. Said no engineer ever. I haven't met a developer in my life who sits there and goes, what I really want is better infrastructure automation. They might say what I've got sucks, but they probably don't sit there and say, this is my problem every day. And what we'd forgotten, our habit was to leap to what many of the vendors in our space try and sell us, which is better automation for infrastructure. And what we've forgotten is what is the developer's pain. Cognitive load can be best described when it's painful. I'll give you a moment like this. You've all been here, I'm sure, where you're in the middle of writing something, doing something important, you're focused, you're deep, and then someone says you've got 10 minutes for a meeting, and you know it's not 10 minutes. You know it. And you also know probably you're not needed. But by then you're interrupted. By then you're thinking about something else. You're context switching to something new. And at that moment, you'll feel your brain unload everything you were already thinking about. And all of a sudden, you're lost within, okay, where was I? What was I doing? Has anyone here walked into a room and forgotten why they walked in there? Good. I'm glad to see there's a good diverse amount of ages admitting to this. It's not an age-related thing. It's a human thing. Because a doorway tells your brain to offload short-term memory. Isn't that great? By just going through something physical, your brain goes, right, new page, let's get rid of the old stuff. The problem with that is if you're in a good moment doing some good work and you walk through a doorway, it's like turning it off and on again. This is what you do when you get disrupted and you move to something else. You offload your short-term memory, and that means every moment you were in, every load you had in your mind is gone. Worse than that, you've probably got about 15 things to think about. We talked earlier about we wanted automation, I think, and we got YAML. Yes. We've increased cognitive load enormously. Shifting left without considering cognitive load is abuse. We're giving people more responsibility, and therefore, and because we're not smoothing that journey, we're giving them more pain. We did this where I work. We created a whole system that increased pain for developers whilst trying to build a platform that helped them. I'm going to tell you more about that in a moment. It comes in a later failure habit. Okay, second failure habit, not thinking about feedback loops. One of the other things that we were sold as being the best thing to do in platform engineering is to have guardrails. Stop people doing silly things. Silly developers. It even sounds slightly patronizing. Create systems that protect people and stop them doing the wrong thing is a very admirable goal. But how you do it needs to consider how people are empowered and held accountable as well as being autonomous. Every guardrail we put in place can be a friction to development, can be a problem, can be a pain. So when we're crafting guardrails, it's not good enough to go, how do we stop them doing things? You have to think carefully about how you help them stay on the road without hitting the guardrails. We got this very wrong. I'll come back to it in just a moment. Failure habit 3, not focusing on flow state. Software development dies slowly in most organizations I've worked in. Through good intentions and good need for security and safety and constraints and governance and regulations, the creative endeavor of software engineering quietly dies. And it dies through what I call the 1,000 frictions of every moment of a developer's life. I'll give you an example where I work at the moment. We have about 300 software developers, give or take a few product managers. And what they do, their day goes like this. They spend their day developing. As far as the company is concerned, they're spending their days developing. But we know that's not true. They actually spend their day trying to figure out what work they need to do, trying to figure out what they need to do that work, trying to figure out who they need to work with, trying to figure out what might be the right set of technologies to even bring to bear. And that's just in the feature development. Now, where I work, not that long ago, that was probably less than 10% of their actual working day. The rest of their working day was in something we call KTLO, keeping the lights on. Enormous amounts of people's lives being poured into manual work to make sure things keep functioning. People's lives being poured into debugging complex pipelines, being poured into manual, non-differentiating work. 60% minimum is what we saw across our teams when we started to categorize what is KTLO. Now, the interesting thing is, when you do platform engineering, you'll be encouraged to build guardrails and to look at automation, self-service automation. But it's trivially easy to automate for the 10 to 20% of feature work, to forget all about the burden of KTLO. In fact, with these habits, I can single-handedly claim that I probably created a lot of KTLO. Isn't that horrible? Isn't that a horror? So this is what we mustn't do. This is why platforms die. Your platform won't be loved if what you do is make life harder. Okay. And then we had AI. and the sudden thought was, we have a new revolution coming along. Maybe that will solve our problem in platform engineering. Maybe platform engineering can evolve into something more potent and powerful because we now have the genie. And I do like calling it the djinn. The reason for that is, if I say genie to people, they tend to think of the Disney one. The Robin Williams, ha ha ha, it's all fine. But no, I prefer the idea of the djinn being essentially some sort of evil, godlike creature that occasionally does what I want, but is very pedantic about my requests. It's much more like the djinn of the fables rather than the Disney version. But we've got it. It's here. It may not be in your organizations yet, but I can almost guarantee you that your CEO is out on a golf course somewhere where his friends or her friends are saying, you're going to need AI in your life. All I can say is AI initiatives are coming. So what are we going to do with that? How is that going to help? What habits are we going to benefit from in an age where AI is around? When AI is your assistance. Okay. Now, something else to know about me, just briefly really, part of the story here, because I want to tell you a story about how we got something wrong and how you can get it right. Something you should know about me is this is kind of my family motto. Well, no, it's not my family motto, it's just mine, but I'm trying to make it my family motto. And you're going to hear good at Latin. There's a few folks going like this. I think we all say that if we're honest. Okay? But this means, I think, no, it doesn't mean that. It means I read, therefore I am. I'm a reader. I remember reading recently an interview with Borges, an incredible author from Argentina. And one of the things he said is, I'm a reader. Everyone thinks I'm a writer, but I'm a reader. If you look at what I love, I'm a reader. In fact, he wrote a poem about this that I believe I'm going to misquote slightly, that starts with, others can brag and be proud of what they've written. I am most proud of what I have read. Okay, so I'm a reader. And as a reader, I spend most of my Friday afternoons here. Because as a reader, I am also a consumer. And I also buy a lot of stuff. And this is Camilla's bookshop in Eastbourne. If you ever visit Eastbourne in the UK, I don't know why you would, but if you ever did find yourself lost and in Eastbourne, go here and be prepared to spend the best 2 hours of your life, apart from the conference where you'll bet much better 2 hours. But this is a great 2 hours too. The wonderful thing about this bookshop is there's a million books and you will never find the one you're looking for. But you will find one you weren't looking for. And that's what happened to me one rainy Friday afternoon. I went in and Camilla, who runs the shop, said, Russ, I've got a problem. I've got a book and I can't sell it. I don't know how to price it. It doesn't exist, is actually what she said, because she's not great at the internet. So I opened up my phone and I was showing her, trying to find where this book was. And this was the book she was showing me. In fact, I've got it with me today. It's this little book here. It's tiny, right? It's right here. Quickly to ask you, what's the oldest book you've ever held? Okay? Keep your hands up if the oldest book you've ever held was from the 1800s. There's a few. Okay. Keep them up if they're in the 1700s. Keep them up 1600s. Keep them up 1400s. 1500s? Okay, cool. Well, yeah, but you wouldn't. That's not fair. People from my course yesterday. Okay. This is from 1578. To give it some scope, this book was published when Galileo was 14 years old. To make it more interesting, if you're into literature, Shakespeare was also 14 years old. The only way I can remember it is the same age. Of course, we think approximately the same age because we're not entirely sure. Records are a bit blurry. The reason I was fascinated to find this book in Camilla's, and of course she eventually found a price to sell it to me for. The reason I was fascinated by it is the more I dug into this book, the more I realized it was reflective of the sorts of revolutions that we in DevOps get subjected to. Okay, we get, in fact, not just DevOps, humanity gets subjected to. Revolutions in information. So this is a 446-year-old book, and I would encourage you at the end of this session, come and have a touch of the book. So you can all say you've touched a book from the 1500s. Now, this is what I ended up discerning from this book. The book itself, by the way, is a Stoic philosophy book. It's full of great advice if you could read Latin or Greek. So for those who can, you're in. This is kind of the pattern that a platform follows. There's a platform inflection point where everything changes. A set of technologies, a set of practices, a set of ideas, they come together and they get packaged in a way that lifts people up in two ways: expected and surprising. When Christophe Plantin was publishing this book in 1578, he wanted to sell books. When Steve Jobs was creating the iPhone, he wanted to sell iPhones. But what they both did in one way or another is create a surprising impact. And they did it because they believed in that potential. But Steve was told there's no market for smartphones. Not really. But he believed there was. He believed a smartphone was what everyone would want. Christophe Plantin believed everyone would want to own books. And so he invested in this idea of mass market books. He believed there needed to be distribution, there needed to be printing, there needed to be something that could make this appealable and accessible to the masses. And that's a pattern that happens all the time when you're doing platforms. When you're doing platforms inside a company, that's the pattern you're looking for. You're looking to establish a set of curated experiences that open you up to expected and sometimes surprising impact. Okay. The funny thing that is every time this sort of revolution, if you like, or evolution, these big moments happen, something very human occurs. Panic. We hate them. We get absolutely scared witless. So let's talk about those quickly. The very first panic was in 1578. No, it wasn't. There was many before. But this was a big one. Okay, in 1578, whilst they were working on this great mass market, mass media production system, leveraging Gutenberg's incredible innovation, this is what the industry was saying. The craft is being cheapened. Books produced by printing are utterly devoid of grace. They stink of the press, not of the pen. This is called the aesthetic complaint. I don't like the look of it. Errors will multiply and learning will decline. Once an error is cast in type, it becomes immortal. That's not true, is it, really? Yeah. Fire teaches us that. But this is the accuracy complaint. Errors are going to be in there. It's going to, oh my goodness, think of all the errors. What they sort of forget is the amount of errors that were introduced by scribes. But anyway, and translation. Don't get me started on translation and the errors that get introduced this way. We'll lose our livelihoods. We're all going to lose our jobs because of this. The press will make monks idle, specifically monks. Wouldn't you have thought being idle as a monk was a good thing? And their pencraft, worthless, absolutely worthless. The economic complaint. Readers will become lazy because giving people more things to read makes you lazy as heck. Easy access to books would produce shallow minds. Wonderful phrases from the time. And knowledge, this is a beautiful one. Knowledge will fall into the wrong hands. The moral complaint, or as I put it, the frightener. Okay, let's go to another revolution. One of my favorite ones, because I lived through it. The synthesizer and sampler panic of 1982. And I love this picture best because I'm pretty sure I had the haircut on the far right. Real musicianship will die. Are you starting to get the thing? We spent a lifetime learning tone and touch, and now a kid with a Casio can do the same. The craft complaint, once again, updated for the 1980s. We'll all be out of work. The economic complaint, once again. Copying is theft. Wait till they get a hold of Napster. The moral complaint. Audiences will stop, listen. I love this one. Brian Eno, who single-handedly created an almost industry of electronic music. His first reaction was, when music is effortless to make, it becomes effortless to forget. Tell that to the kids putting out music on YouTube and getting record deals off the basis of something that's got a good hook. Okay, so let's race to now. Our current panic. The AI panic. I think it wouldn't be so much of a panic if AI looked like that. Particularly the hair. The craft is being cheapened. The aesthetic complaint. Anyone can generate code now. Damn them. Where's the craftsmanship? Yesterday on the course, someone said, we're getting lots of people who want to do low-code and no-code solutions. And they're absolutely right. And it's right to make us nervous, because there's a long history of this being a bad idea. But the idea of democratizing, enabling everyone to create software, there's some attractiveness to that. You only got to look at what's happened to literature and writing. Democracy requires it, and it happens because anyone can publish these days. But look how long it took for us to get democratized publishing. Developers will stop thinking. The intellectual complaint. We'll have dumber developers. If the machine writes the code, who understands it? Well, the humans. We'll talk a little bit in a minute about why it's always the humans. We can't delegate our responsibility and our accountability to what we create. But we can be accelerated. We'll lose our jobs. Session musicians lost gigs, scribes feared unemployment, now developers eye automated pull requests warily. Okay, this isn't the first time that we've been scared. We're all fairly battle-hardened. I don't think there's anyone here from the 1500s. But there's a fair few, I'd guess, were in there in the 80s. And we've also had a few others in between, right? We've had the cloud revolution, which was a revolution, one of the dullest revolutions, I think, in the world, because really what it is, commoditize access to compute and other facilities. But still, a revolution of sorts. So we've been through these things, and we know that we get inflated expectations, and we know that we've got legitimate concerns. There's always bubbles, and there's always fear about our impact on the planet. But if it makes a difference, it will stick. And so the question then becomes, what do we do with it? And every single time it has this pattern that we can follow and we can harness as platform engineers, as DevOps engineers, as security. We can all benefit from knowing that we're at that inflection point. So I call this the historical allergy to anything big and new that comes along that can change the way we work. And we always fear the next leap. We always fear the big change. And we certainly should remain very skeptical of what we're being told by vendors. However, whenever one of these moments happens, we have a similar set of habits to adopt. We've got a new craft to work with. We have new meaning to navigate. We have new literacy. What does it mean to be literate as a software developer who's trying to embrace AI and be faster in what they produce, still keeping their quality levels high? What does that mean? If you're a team of developers where some of your team are AI assistants, genies, how does that work? And what we're doing there, every new literacy that we create produces a new agency. So the new literacy of the print media created an incredible amount of agency across Europe. We went from, I think, top single digits literacy. Across the next couple of 100 years, we ended up in the top 70 or 80% of us being all literate. Incredible change. And the difference that enabled that no one really thought about, democracy. In fact, I made a joke yesterday that one of the big changes was the removal of monarchs, apart from my country. We still have one, although they're removing themselves pretty quickly. So, new agency is what's happening. The power to do things shifts with the new literacy that comes along. This is why we get scared. We focus on what we lose. We don't always focus on what we gain. Okay, so when it comes to the Genie, you should be assisted. I am. As a developer of many, many years, I let it help. I am very careful. And what I do is I carefully let it augment my activities, but I don't abdicate responsibility. Everything we produce comes down to me. And that's how I treat my engagement with the Genie. Okay. What this enables me to do is the habits that I want you to develop when it comes to platform engineering. Because AI will accelerate your work, and so you'll need faster feedback loops. Let me tell you a story very quickly of exactly how this feels and how this worked where I work at the moment. We created something called the scorecard. We created something that told teams of developers how healthy their applications were. You can actually see this packaged in developer portals now. So we placed a great dashboard that told them how healthy their work was. And they did what every developer on the planet will do. Ignore it. Okay, so we thought, right, governance comes in, guardrails come in. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that if you ignore it long enough, it will block your route to production. This is called a gate. We've introduced an approval gate. And if you're not listening to us, you're going to get a little reminder. What happened next? Well, we work in a culture where features are kind of what people want from our stuff. New features, new products, new things. So who's going to moan if software starts taking longer to appear in production? Not the developers. The product owners, the CEO, they're going to get a little annoyed. So what do? They work the back channels. And suddenly, we've got to weaken our gate because we're getting in the way of flow and delivery. Okay. So how do we solve this? How do we solve this in an AI-assisted world? Okay, so we look carefully about where the feedback loop's going. It's being disappeared into a wall. So right, where else can we surface it? We chose a really stupid place to surface it. We put it in Backstage. No developer is developing in Backstage that I know of. If anyone wants to correct me on this, and you are the one developer who is developing in Backstage, I would love to meet you. And I'm pretty sure the Backstage folks would want to do a case study. So we're putting it in the wrong place. We're also putting it in the wrong place at the wrong time. We were surfacing the scorecard stats after the pull request has been created, even whilst it's being marched along in the pipeline. We were trying to shift responsibility left, but we weren't going very far with it. So it was the wrong moment to raise the problem. Wrong location, wrong moment, and not getting to the right people. That's the murderous triumvirate. You get those, everything dies. Okay, so how do we solve it? Where are the developers? You tell me. Where are your developers trying to be? Maybe I should put it that way. If you say they're in meetings, I get you. But we don't want them to be, really. Workshops maybe, but not meetings. Where are developers trying to be? They're making pull requests. They're in the IDE. They're trying to develop. They're trying to do the thing they enjoy doing, which is exploring and writing code. So where should we surface this? Where can we get to the right people at the right place, the right time? The IDE. So we pushed our scorecard into the IDE. We did it through the Genies. We converted our scorecard into specifications, AI specifications. We then surfaced those to every single IDE. In our case, it's a Microsoft shop, so forgive me, it's Visual Studio. But we then instructed those AI assistants to surface when someone is actually developing and is doing something that might fall foul of the scorecard. This is like giving someone a superpower to overcome the thing that was the stick in the past. But we went one step further. Because what's the worst thing you can put into the IDE? It turns out to be interruption and annoyance. No one wants slack in the IDE. And we were dangerously close to achieving it. So we had to go one step further. We need to surface the information in the right place, at the right time, to the right people, and make it actionable immediately. And that's what we invested our time into. We increased our specifications to not just say what to look for, but also how you might solve it. And that meant that our developers could be in flow, get the feedback at the moment they want it, and begin to accept the change. It's literally an acceptance of the change at that point. The important part of that equation is the flow. We're keeping them where they want to be, where they're most creative at that moment. So we want fast feedback loops. That's the habit. We should obsess about fast feedback loops. But they have to be the right thing, to the right people, in the right place, at the right time, and actionable. Otherwise, you're an annoyance. This also turns out to reduce cognitive load. If we have AI assistants there that also are aware of these specifications and aware of what good looks like as far as our platform's concerned, they can perform 70 to 80% of the work needed to keep you aligned with the platform. Enormous mode of change. I've lost track of how many times developers have said to me, I don't want to go to Backstage to press a button. I don't want to go to GitHub to go and see my pipeline. I don't really want to go to my observability tools, if I'm being honest, but I can if you can point me in the right direction. Reducing cognitive load is a habit. I constantly look for what's in a developer's brain and what I can reduce in that brain so they can focus on what matters. And then the last one is supporting ultimately flow state. We mentioned before, we want flow. Through platform engineering, with the wrong habits, we create friction. What we want is flow. We want a system that is so natural to use and quick to use that a developer hardly knows it's there. I laughed once, and I have to admit, it's a little bit cheeky, but someone showed me a developer portal, and I literally looked at my clock, and I was like, did we go back to the 90s? Why do I want a web page? I'm working in my IDE. What are you giving me here? I've got to go to a website to click a button to create a project? I don't want to do that. I'm in my IDE. Give me a command line. Give me something that says create new thing, and I create my new thing, because I'm right there, right then, right, let's do it. Hugely empowering. And even better, if you can do it in a way that conforms with all the standards that I don't need to worry about anymore. Brilliant, I love you. Don't make me go to Backstage to do it. Supporting flow state will mean you doing things that feel quite different than what you've been sold in terms of the tooling that's out there. Obsessing about keeping people in flow state means you keep them where they're doing the valuable work. Okay, one last thing on AI. The genie's already out of the bottle, so the only sensible thing for us to do is through those three lenses of supporting flow state, of reducing cognitive load, and enabling fast change and everything else that goes on. Those are the things we can tune the AI to help us with. We need to consider the wishes we want only. And the obsession is simple. We should obsess about developer experience. Obsess about it as platform engineers. Obsess about it as DevOps. All the promise of what we're trying to achieve comes through focusing on those 3 dimensions of what a developer experience needs to be. Fast feedback loops, cognitive load, and flow state. Okay, before I finish, and I know I'm getting a little bit over time now, but I want to do this one last thing with you. I want you to trust me. Now, admittedly, you've just met me. And the first thing I told you is I get things wrong. But trust me. I want you to close your eyes so I can tell you a story. For those that have, thank you very much. I promise I won't wander around behind you taking selfies. Okay. We have, I believe, about 28 million developers in the world. If through our obsession with DevEx, we reduced their daily or weekly toil, in fact, they're just their weekly toil by 10 minutes. Please open your eyes now. Take a little look around the room. By just making that difference, we would save them every single working life, the whole working life of every person in this room. By saving every developer on the planet 10 minutes, your working lives wouldn't be lost and wasted. That's where the table stakes are. That's what we're trying to do. And I can recommend a book to you. No, I can't recommend the Epictetus book. I can't. You can try and find another copy, but as far as I know, there's 2 in the Vatican, 1 in Oxford, 1 in Cambridge, and a few in the States. So good luck getting another one. But this book, Frictionless, is incredible. It's not been out long. It comes from the same authors, pretty much, that worked on Accelerate. Abby Noda and Nicole. Buy it. It's on Kindle. It's dead cheap. I'm a big paper book fan, but the paper book is a lot more than the Kindle one. In that Kindle, I think is less than €1. So get a copy of it, take a look at it, start to obsess about DevEx. Also, please check out the Software Enchiridion. That's my version of this little book. It's my blog. Everything is free on there. It's free on there in perpetuity. I share all of the lessons, all of the experiences, everything I've ever encountered. I have about 600 articles at any moment in time, and I pick one every day to publish. So please check it out if you're interested in more of the same. And other than that, I wish you an incredible conference. Thank you very much for your time this morning.